Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Wingspan from Stonemaier Games. Wingspan, and I'll be lightly touching upon the expansions European and Oceania, going briefly into detail what they add, how I feel they mix up the experience, but let's go ahead and dive into this, starting off with that with, well, this is Wingspan. This is an older review, well, a newer review of an older game, but Wingspan is the very, very popular game from Stonemaier Games that has sold over 1 million copies, done tremendously well. I believe it's their highest selling game to date, and Wingspan is an accessible tableau builder designed by Elizabeth Hargrave with a whole bunch of expansions, incredibly popular game in the board game space, like super popular. In any case, going ahead and diving into this, what is Wingspan? How does it play? We'll talk about the expansions add later. It's easy enough to get into them towards the end, but Wingspan is a tableau builder. You're going to play across 4 rounds, and each of the 4 rounds you're going to take, well, 8, then 7, then 6, then 5 actions. So 8, 7, 6, 5. Each round you get 1 fewer action, but the good news is each round your tableau gets a little bit better and stronger, and you're able to get more done with less forcing yourself to try to roll as many dice as possible. You see, you have 4 core actions in the game. 4 actions you're going to be taking. The first action you can take is you can play a bird. When you do so, you're going to go ahead and grab one of your markers. You're going to mark the play a bird action, and you're going to take a bird. Let's say we have these birds over here. You're going to look at their cost in food that's on the bird. You're going to pay that food from your supply of food tokens that you ideally have in front of you. You'll pay that food. Look, this one requires that, and we'll put this down, and then you'll place it down into the habitats shown here. Some birds have 1 habitat, some have 2, and some can go in any of the 3 habitats. In this case, we're playing the Inca dove over here. We're going to place it down in this habitat. This column requires no eggs. We'll explain that in a second. But we pay the cost. When play, lay 1 egg on each of your birds with that kind of nest, which would include itself. But otherwise, this is not the most efficient time to play this because this could generate a bunch of eggs for us. In this case, we just got the 1 egg on it. That's going to be the first action. Play a bird. Pay the food cost, put the bird down in habitat, and placing birds down in habitats is first of all going to generate the points on the birds themselves, but just as importantly, it's going to make your actions in those habitats more efficient. The more birds you can get down, the better the actions you can take when you take one of the habitat actions, which are the following. First of all, we have gain food. When you gain food, you look at the spot over here that's the leftmost available spot, in this case this one over here, and we're going to take 1 food die from the feeder over here. So we can go ahead and just grab that. We're going to take that out of the feeder, and we're going to take a single rat icon. Done. That's the gain food action. Very inefficient. But you can see how potentially, if you had a bunch of birds, let's go ahead and grab a few birds. Let's pretend we had a few birds down in the top habitat. You can see how potentially having 3 birds here would suddenly make it so that when you take that action, you are now taking 2 food from the food tray, but additionally you can discard a card to take an additional food. As you put down birds in habitats, you're going to get stronger and stronger actions, laying more eggs. You're going to have the option to get more food and draw more cards. But before we explain that, let's cover the additional actions. Second action or third action is laying eggs. When you lay eggs, you look again at the leftmost available spot, and you lay that many eggs on birds up to their egg limit, which is listed on the birds. We're going to go ahead and put those down over there. Then over here, the third action is drawing bird cards. That's how you're going to draw birds either from the top of the deck, or alternatively from these 3 available birds. You're going to draw a bird card, you're going to add that to your hand, which is how you're going to struggle, how you're going to try to work towards achieving your strategy in this game. And those are the core actions you're taking. You're either playing a bird, gaining food, which is helpful to play birds, laying eggs, which is going to be worth points but also helpful to play birds, and drawing bird cards, which is, well, essential to actually play birds. As far as the eggs are going to be worth points on the birds themselves. In general, every egg is worth a point, which is great for the end game over there. But additionally, when you play birds in columns 2, 3, 4, and 5, you have to play additional eggs to those birds. So if I play a bird in column 2 over here, if I pay for this bird over here and I place it down over here, I have to remove an egg from a card because that's in 1 egg column. As you go further out, it's going to get more expensive. Placing that down over here would cost the food resources on the bird, but also would cost me 2 eggs. And that's what you're going to be doing as you take these actions. Now again, in the first round you have 8 actions, second round you have 7, then 6, then 5, because you're going to get better and better. Your actions are getting stronger and stronger as you go. That single action in the first round where you can take a single die, well, hopefully by the time you get into the third round, maybe you're actually taking 3 dice, which means your action, even though you only have 6 actions in the third round instead of 8 in the first, you're going to potentially be taking 3 dice in a single action, making your action economy significantly better in the game. And that's basically what you're doing in Wingspan. A whole bunch of other things you can be mindful of. For example, one of the big deals you want to be mindful of is the fact that when you take an action, you also activate the powers on any birds to the left of that action. So you're going to go ahead and activate this, then look at this action and this action. On the brown action specifically, these over here are when played actions, but you're going to look at the brown actions on the cards and activate those, giving you another degree of tableau buildup as you try to slide cards underneath birds, which are worth points, as you try to put food tokens on birds, which are worth points, or as you try to put eggs on birds, which are worth points, or as you just try to play birds, which are worth points. And then additionally, it's worth noting the fact that in between each round, you're going to have goals. You're going to have this goal chart over here, which gives you specific goals as far as how you can earn extra points in the game for getting first, second, third, and fourth place in this game over here for having specific requirements, having eggs in those types of birds, having sets of eggs in different habitats, having those types of having birds in the water area. So you're going to have different goals you're going for, different ways you want to be mindful of that. You'll see them at the start of the game, and you're going to want to work towards them as you try to pace out your strategy and think through what the best way for you to excel in Wingspan is. And that's basically Wingspan. 4 rounds of play, 8, 7, 6, 5 actions per round, trying to play birds, activate your gain food to play more birds, gain eggs to play more birds, or draw bird cards to play more birds, and do so as efficiently as possible through the combination of bird abilities that work well together, trying to find the right birds that you think can play off one another, trying to be mindful of the goals, and hopefully getting more points than the other players before the game ends. Which brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. This is a Stonemaier Games production, which means the rulebook is fantastic. Generally, I've had few to no issues with Stonemaier Games as far as the rulebooks. They feel premium off the bat, but additionally, they're so clear, so accessible, so easy to dive into. Wingspan is another one of those games where it's another Stonemaier game that is just incredibly easy to explain, to dive into. It's accessible, and it gives you strong tableau building as well. Overall, ease of play is fantastic. Game length comes in at roughly an hour. It can go faster with players who know what they're doing, or at lower player counts. I'd say you can probably knock out a game in half an hour if you're playing with 2 people who really know what they're doing, but I would say typically expect 45 minutes to an hour for this, potentially longer if you're starting with new players who don't know, at higher player counts, things like that. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, oh, and this is a 1 to 5 player game, by the way. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the tableau building in this game is rewarding. Like I mentioned already, the fact that by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th round, the actions you're taking have a much better economy. Not only are you getting 3 dice per action, you're also activating 3 powers along the way, and the type of powers you're activating is going to depend on how you built out your tableau, especially when you have those birds that are fluid to different types of regions they can go in, and the fact that you can try to build together sets of things that work well. I'm going to go ahead and use this power to go ahead and generate a food. I'm going to use the next bird over to spend that food, to tuck 2 cards underneath it. You're going to have that kind of cycle going on in the game as you use what you're doing to feed off one another. You are building out a tableau. You're doing so with giant stacks of bird cards. Before we even get to the expansions, and we will get to the expansions, you're going to have giant stacks of cards available with tons of different abilities, tons of different ways or variety to the experience you are going through. The tableau building in this game is accessible, it is easy, it is rewarding, and getting the right combination of birds is just a lot of fun, and getting the right combinations of which lanes you go for. You won't be able to get 15 cards out, or at least I haven't done it, maybe you have, but getting a bunch of cards out you will be able to do. Trying to figure out the patterns of which rows you go for. You're going to focus on more drawing cards and laying eggs and then hoping to augment the food through your powers. Or maybe you go ahead and just focus on eggs and food, and the drawing cards you don't worry as much because you're going to go ahead and get the economy you need, and you'll get the cards you need, and you'll have a little bit of less action efficiency. Or do you try to pace yourself out a little bit on all 3 rows, which the plus side of that means you're not spending those extra eggs on the last columns, but it does mean you don't have any single one thing you're amazing at. The choices you make as you build out your tableau there's a lot of ways you can try to pursue those choices in a otherwise very simple game of 4 actions, 4 rounds, very simple, very accessible game with a decent tableau attached to it. And the game depth versus playtime versus accessibility, the combination of all that together in Wingspan is absolutely amazing. It is accessible, it's a good gateway game, but it's a good gateway game with enough depth to it that is rewarding and engaging for higher level players. As far as what I don't like in the game, the first of all is I don't like the mathiness of the end game. And that's a thing that I think that as you play this game, you'll find that in the last, not just the last turn of the game, but sometimes the last 3 or 4 turns of the game, especially if you've built out your lay eggs production. So you're getting 4 eggs, possibly 5 eggs in a single action, and 5 eggs translates to a single point. 5 eggs translates into 5 points. The problem with that is sometimes you can sit there and say, well, if I spend an action to draw cards, then I can get this, and then I spend an action to gain food, then I can play it, and then I play it as an action, I can play it, and ta-da, I got 5 points with 3 actions because this bird is worth 5 points. Or you can just lay eggs, which is worth 5 points for a single action. Once you've built up your economy, once you've built up your engine in this game, laying eggs for the last few turns ends up being the most efficient thing to do, but often the least satisfying thing to do. In a game that does not have that many actions across the whole game, spending your last 4 turns laying eggs might be the way to win, and often is, but I just find is not that satisfying, and the game can turn into that math efficiency at the end, where many of these tableau building games inherently are. it just becomes clearer and clearer as you get to the end of a game of Wingspan. And secondly is I find that Wingspan, no matter how many times I play it, I never care about a single card. And this could be because the theme is not necessarily to my specific taste. I don't mind the bird theme, but it's also not pulling me in. But also the sheer variety of bird names and the lack of any real association with it. At the end of the day, I have an easier time connecting to, I don't know, a dwarf soldier. I can kind of mentally picture that, as opposed to by the time this game is over, by the time this conversation is over, I won't remember the difference between a Cason's finch and an Inca dove. I just won't be putting the powers together with those things, versus a dwarf soldier kind of makes sense to me. This is just me and the types of games I play. It's not an actual critique of Wingspan, it's just how it works for me. But that does mean that when I play Wingspan, I've never felt connected to any cards. I've never felt like any card particularly mattered. I've never felt, and they do matter, to be very clear. There are some cards where I'm like, I need that card, it works perfectly for my engine, but I always kind of notice that in the moment as I reread the cards every single time. Maybe I need to play Wingspan more, but whenever I play Wingspan, cards don't stick out at me, and I have a harder time connecting the cards with just anything else. They're functional. The variety is there. They do a good job. I just don't get connected to them, and they don't mean anything to me. As far as I can see, others not liking. First of all, the card market can sometimes be unfair to any number of things, including your engine and your goals or anything. If you're going for the goals over there and trying to figure out what you need, and you see another player has more of this type of card and you're just trying to get more of them, but you can't, and they keep drawing what they need to get them, that can be frustrating. If you find that the cards you want in the card market don't work for the various environments you're going for, that can be frustrating. If the abilities on them don't seem to work and no one's clearing them, that can all be frustrating in the game. Additionally, speaking of frustrating and lack of availability, the food dice tray over here can also be a little frustrating. Drawing dice from the food tray over here, there is a rule that says if you only have one food type, you can re-roll the dice, which is very helpful. But past that, sometimes you're just stuck with the fact that, congratulations, there's cherries and the rats, and I don't need cherries and rats, and no one is clearing the food tray, and you may have to spend an action to just take food you don't need to clear the food tray, upon which you'll re-roll the dice, and someone will take the food you need anyway. That can absolutely be frustrating at times. It helps if you build a strategy around having a little more variety in terms of what you can take in, but if you don't, it can be frustrating. As far as final thoughts on Wingspan, before we get into the opinion on the expansions and stuff, Wingspan is a good game that I've always enjoyed playing. Continuously. Whenever I play Wingspan, I have fun. I've never not liked my plays of it. But I do find that it has tableau building in a way that there are other tableau building games I'd rather play. Games that give me the same highs of Wingspan, but with me being more invested and involved in what's happening. With Wingspan, mechanically speaking, the game is top notch. Mechanically speaking, the game does everything that I would want it to do. It is a good game. For me, Wingspan's a 4 out of 5. I like it. It's accessible. It's engaging. It's rewarding. Also, there are games I personally prefer to play because the theme just doesn't do it for me. And while theme alone is not necessarily a problem, there are plenty of games in my collection where I can get over or past the theme. I find that Wingspan almost integrates the theme well enough, almost too well, in the sense that there's a million different birds with a million different names, but it means I don't feel connected to it, or I don't really get a sense of any memory or association with those birds that makes it harder for me to feel compelled to, hey, I want to find that bird come out. I want that engine to happen. And the laying egg thing continues to be a problem for me every single game. Overall, Wingspan's great. A 4 to 5 is a good score. I like this game. It's solid, but there are some small things that hold it back for me compared to where it is for others. In any case, well, before we get into that, as far as expansions, let's talk about expansions. We have the European and the Oceania expansion. And European expansion basically just adds more stuff. It adds, well, new egg colors as well if you want that, but it adds new cards, more variety to the scoring opportunities you have, more ways the cards will engage. Some cards will interact with things later down the road, giving you more planning opportunities. Overall, the Oceania expansion, the European expansion, is a good expansion for those who just want more variety to the game. I don't not recommend it, but also I don't think it changes up the game in any reasonable way. It's good if you want more cards in your Wingspan deck. Oceania will mix things up a drop more, although, again, not significantly for me. Oceania will give you a new player board with a new action and a new resource type, a new food type, that's going to give you a nectar, which counts as wild, and they have a few scoring majorities around it. It does add a few new ways to play, and of course, more cards, a few new options for the strategy. Again, overall good. I think this is a better expansion I'd recommend over European in terms of just, it gives you the variety and the gameplay changes to mix it up, especially if you're playing a lot of Wingspan. But again, overall, it does not change for me the core Wingspan experience. It's another good expansion, good for variety, not one I consider necessarily essential. Both of these are just good for people who want more Wingspan and are not necessary for those who didn't need to know. If you're unsure if you need these expansions, you probably don't. If you just want more Wingspan, both of them are great choices. As far as other game recommendations, I'm going to go 3 this time. Usually I go 2, but I'm going to go 3 for a reason over here. First of all, if you're looking for something that is Another Tableau builder that is more accessible and easier to dive into than Wingspan, I recommend Splendor. Splendor is a great Tableau builder that is more gateway than Wingspan, much easier to dive into, very accessible, does not have the same depth and reward as Wingspan, but is easier to play. If you're looking for the game that I personally tend to pick over Wingspan, well, Everdell. I once did a full video comparing Wingspan and Everdell, and as much as I do enjoy Wingspan, I love Everdell, and I just really, really like Wingspan. And then lastly, if you're looking to level up your Tableau building and you're ready for something that takes you to the next step, well, Terraforming Mars is my absolute favorite Tableau builder of all time, a game I thoroughly love, and it's definitely going to ramp up where you are with Tableau building. But if you like what Wingspan's doing, if you like that sense of building out cards and getting better and stronger from a ton of different cards, well, Terraforming Mars will absolutely do that. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.